Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland. Tonight we're going to be talking about musicianship, integrity, honesty, and the cost of doing business. We're back to talking about utilizing backing tracks while a band or an artist plays in front of an audience live. And a whole lot of rock icons are weighing in on the matter. You know, it's getting to the point where the average concert goer has got to ask themselves, is it live or is it karaoke? All right, so we've talked about this on this channel before, but tonight we're going to cover some artists that we haven't covered in the past, and tonight we're going to be basing this entire video on an article written by Chad Childers. Believe it or not, this is the third time that I have done a video on an article this guy has written. Either I like the way he writes or I love the subjects that he chooses to write about. All right, so Chad chose to start off his article in a very interesting way. He's questioning whether it's right or wrong to use backing tracks while an artist plays live. And he starts off this article by saying to use backing tracks or not. It's one of the hottest topics in the world of rock and metal, and there are some very nuanced responses to the question when it comes to how you present your band in a live setting. Now, he goes on to say there are those who will argue there should be no backing tracks used, that the live experience is about hearing exactly what you're seeing played on stage. Others will argue that there are things added to recordings in the studio that aren't simply replicated on stage without the help of technology. Not to mention the cost of bringing all of the players from your studio experience on the road is prohibitive as well. Some acts merely use backing tracks to enhance or fulfill the live sound that is primarily still played by the band, while other acts may use pre-recorded tracks as a major part of their live show. But how much is too much? Should the live experience be as close as possible to the album, or should it be its own unique experience? There's plenty to consider here, and there are bands that have made those considerations in how they present themselves live. Now, the article goes on to quote a whole lot of people here. As a matter of fact, 32 rockers have spoken on this subject, and we're going to cover a few of them in tonight's video. Now, we've already talked about Ronnie Radke from Falling in Reverse, how they had to cancel a gig because their laptops didn't arrive. They couldn't play live without their laptops. Now, Ronnie went on to say, as a band in 2022, you need your laptops. It's like driving a car without an engine. All I can say to that is that if he is saying that it's the backing tracks that he can't do without, that is the engine of his live experience, maybe we don't need that live experience, folks. Sebastian Bach even hints that it can retard creativity as well as musicianship. He says, I don't see a lot of bands coming up that are going to replace the classic rock stars, because too many of them rely on tapes. He goes on to say that will not stand the test of time, that he thinks that this is more or less a temporary time period for live music. Now, before we go on, folks, think about this. What is on those laptops? Not all of you are musicians. Not all of you have been involved in recording music. Well, here's what's on the laptop. You see what this is, folks? This is a mixer, all right? That's what they're talking about. That's what comes up on screen. And they've got all these faders and any of the tonal controls all pre-done. Some of it even being automated. They don't even have a guy there to turn these faders down anymore. And these laptops can carry hundreds of different tracks, not just the 10 that you see represented by the faders on my mixer here in the studio. Now think of that. You've got a 4 or 5 member band backed up by at least 100 tracks. They can put anything on that laptop. They then pump that through the PA system, as well as the mic'd drums on stage, as well as the mic'd amps on stage, and it all becomes a blend. Now think about this. The average concert goer isn't a musician or has a lot of experience in a studio and doesn't know what's on the laptop, and there's nothing on the tickets that say that there will be backing tracks used. We got to get to the point where I think at least that has to be done in this case. Now the article goes on to talk about Flea and how they did their Super Bowl moment, right? And that the vocals were live, but the rest of the band had been mixed out of that because it was just too big of a show. Really? The Super Bowl is too big of a show. So when are we going to start getting holograms to make the play for the players? That's a live event. We should be getting live music, and shame on Red Hot Chili Peppers for succumbing to those kinds of demands for that kind of event. Axl Rose weighed in on the matter in this particular article, but he's an idiot. We're not going to cover what he has to say. And Nikki Sixx weighed in on the matter, but we're not going to cover him either. He's as big an idiot as Axl Rose. And that band has been caught miming and playing to backing tracks too many times. How do we know that? Well, even one of the members of the band, Mick Mars, has admitted to it. Of course, that got him kicked out, or has a lot to do with his share into that band at the very least. And then to make matters worse, Gene Simmons opens his mouth. Now listen to this. He says, "There's nobody with a synthesizer on our stage. There's no samples on the drums. There's nothing. There's very few bands that do that now." And then he mentions AC/DC, Metallica, and us, as if Kiss was ever on AC/DC or Metallica's level. And then Scott Ian of Anthrax, he says, "I don't want to sound like an old man, but I mean, come on. Look, I get it. If it's some kind of giant pop act and giant productions or something like that, or if it's Pink Floyd doing The Wall," and he goes on talking about pre-recordings of the Moog synthesizer that Pink Floyd was famous for. You have to understand, first of all, anything recorded with those early Moog synthesizers, playing a Moog synthesizer is like riding a wild stallion. You can only get them dialed in for about a half hour to an hour's time, and whatever you record there is almost impossible to get back verbatim. So yes, I think that using backing tracks like that is fine. Same thing with a lot of the material we hear on Who's Next by The Who. All of that, that's fine. And if AC/DC wants to get up there and add a recording, to hell's bells, who am I to complain about that? Because in all of those cases, the band is still playing live. So for me, occasional, and I mean occasional, folks, special effects are fine. And if it kind of fills out the sound, I still say AC/DC should have this giant bell on stage with their lead singer hitting it live. Wouldn't that be dramatic? Missed opportunity, guys. Wolfgang Van Halen says that half of the people live, it's tracks nowadays, which is so huge. It's just a fucking bummer. Of course, we've talked about Blackie Lawless of Wasp and how he's admitted to using backing tracks to enhance the sound on their records. What does he mean? And what do other rock stars mean when they use the word enhance? I'll tell you what it means, folks. The whole damn song's recording is up there, and they choose whatever is needed in the moment. If the drummer has wrecked his ankle, they've got the drum tracks there, okay? And for the show, as a last-minute thing, maybe I'm not too against that. But when you've got 48 tracks of the band performing, and it's played and mixed in with what they're actually played on stage, with their amps on stage turned down in the mix, it becomes less live and more Memorex. Dave Mustaine said that years ago he quit singing the backing vocals on his albums because he didn't feel that it was right for him to show up live and have somebody else do the backing vocals when on the original song it didn't have them, it had him. But even Dave thinks it's okay to occasionally use backing tracks. Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters say, "What you see is what you get. We play it live." He doesn't even want to be in a band that would have to do it any other way. He loves the occasional mistakes. I mean, that's what I love when I go see a band. If you see Jimmy Page wreck a solo, that's okay. 3 seconds later, he'll play something that's even more brilliant than is on any of their albums. That's why I love true, unadulterated live performances. The music is still breathing. And I'm even backed up by Chris Robinson, wonderful vocalist, by the way, of the Black Crowes. He says, "When you need to use that shit, it's time to stop." Ian Gillan and Deep Purple are against it. Ian talking about 20 years ago, he saw a band at Soundcheck and was amazed about how good they sounded. His friend that was standing next to him nudged him on the shoulder and showed him a huge wire, a snake. We call them a snake, all right? These are about this thick around and tons of wires coming from the mixing console over to a shack that said, "Keep out." Inside there were the backing tracks that they were hearing at a sound check. Now it's Phil Collen here of Def Leppard that really hits the nail on the head for me anyway. He says, "Well, it depends what you're talking about. I mean, we've always used keyboard things and parts of a drum loop, like on the song Rocket. You couldn't really play that part live, so we've used stuff like that." That goes back to what I was saying about Pink Floyd using a recording of an untainable Moog synthesizer, or the sound or recording of a bell when AC/DC plays live. And of course, David Cloverdale had to weigh in on the matter too, boasting that his band doesn't use backing tracks, even though he uses the second worst thing I can think of, hidden singers behind the wings that are covering his rapidly deteriorating voice. But you know what, folks? We were going to talk about musicianship, honesty, integrity, and the cost of doing business, didn't I? And that's where we get to at this point in the video. You see, first of all, bands that rely heavily on backing tracks ruin their musicianship, okay? You get your chops from doing it day in and day out. And by maintaining your chops and keeping your mind sharp, you're open to being open to creativity. Guess what? You'll have an album in no time if you think like that. And since none of these tickets say on the ticket, the show that you are about to see is partially not live, then honesty goes right out the window. And when honesty goes out the window, guess who goes out the back door? That's right, integrity. So what do we wind up with? Lesser musicians giving us lesser shows and absolutely nothing about them as individuals to be a fan about. And that gets us to the fourth point in the video tonight, the cost of doing business. I mean, if you're a band who has backing tracks of orchestras and all of that, show us what you can do and how the band sounds without that. That's actually more interesting for me to see live than to hear an identical performance to the record. The only time I want to hear an identical performance to the record is if the musicians are doing it live on stage and they're showing off. A band like Yes comes to mind. Or, for that matter, look at any early concerts of the Moody Blues. They relied on Mike Pender to supply whatever he could in the moment, even though on their records they had lavish orchestration on those records. I loved it when they did that. But think about when they played Red Rocks live. They brought in an entire orchestra. That is considered one of the greatest live rock concerts of all time. And there is the cost of doing business. If you want to bring your orchestra around, then bring it to the special shows. Pay those musicians. Reflect it in your ticket prices, all right? You know, on those shows is when you charge the ticket prices you're out there charging right now. All right, so to me, folks, this isn't just a matter of an opinion. I know I'm gonna get some people in the comments saying, I don't care, I just want it to sound its best, and whatever they have to do to get that sound is what I want as a concert goer. But if you are one of those that believe that, what about some of the other things that I've brought up? Honesty, integrity, musicianship. Does it not bother you that this kind of presentation actually hurts the art form that you're excited enough about to go see live? I know for me, I don't go see bands that play with backing tracks. I don't care who they are. And that's my whole point here. We as an audience have to have integrity too. And in that integrity, demand more of those who would get in front of us to perform. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. My question to you, fellow Tribalites, is this. Is using a few backing tracks as special effects okay? Using any amount of backing tracks okay to you as long as you get to hear what you heard on the record? Or do you want to hear the band and what they can do in front of you in the moment? By the way, if you enjoyed the video tonight, please give it a thumbs up. That helps channel growth. YouTube algorithm sends it out to more people's feeds, right? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, that's easy. Just hit that subscribe to the tribe button, then tap that top bell icon, and you'll be notified of all my stuff. All right, I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line, and together, you and I, folks, we are the tribe. I'll see you in my next video.